This video presents an idea for reforming one critical aspect of how we select representatives to the United States Congress. It's an idea I've thought about for a long time, but it's incomplete, and I would welcome your help refining it. I'll start by laying out what I see as the urgent political problem of our time. I won't spend any time right now persuading you that this is the case, but if you're with me on the basics of the problem, please watch the rest of the video and see if you agree. It isn't controversial to assert that the U.S. House of Representatives is broken. Congress these days is oddly out of touch with the consensus popular views it was designed to represent, and it is incapable of working cooperatively with the Senate and executive branch for the common good. It includes way too many hacks, cranks, and ideologues who seem to operate with political impunity. Why is that? The simple reason is that the two dominant political parties control how the boundaries for congressional districts are drawn. They're quite brazen about this. You can find endless examples about how safe Republican and Democrat districts have come about that make politicians essentially unafraid of what their constituents think of their behavior. This is a blatant and corrosive conspiracy against the public interest. So, we must get politicians and special interests of all kinds, whether we're sympathetic to them or not, out of the redistricting process entirely. The solution is what I have taken to call hands-off redistricting, which relies on just two very simple principles. The first is, again, that there's no place for special interests in drawing congressional district boundaries. And the second, which I view as intuitively obvious, is that neighbors, to the extent possible, should vote for the same congressional seat and look to the same congressperson to represent them in the House. Once you accept these very simple and basic principles, you've accepted the need for a technocratic solution to the need for setting district boundaries. In other words, it's wrong to think of this as a political problem, or even something that politicians should have anything to do with. Voters should demand a technical solution that can be measured by its effectiveness in allowing neighbors to vote together, and the best technical solution to that problem should prevail, period. Please stick with me and I'll show you some graphic examples. But first, let me lay out for you the 5 rules required for hands-off redistricting. The first 3 are basically how things work now. Each state's apportionment of districts, in other words the number of districts it will have for the next 10 years, is modified every 10 years, which triggers redistricting in states that gain or lose delegates. So, for example, after the 2010 census, several southern and western states were apportioned additional delegates to Congress, and several in the Northeast and upper industrial Midwest states lost seats. This process is mandated by the Constitution, and in fact is the very reason the U.S. Census Bureau was originally created, to provide the data for apportionment of delegates to the House of Representatives. Rule 2. Every congressional district must have, within a reasonable range, the same number of people as the other districts in that state. And Rule 3. The congressional districts should be contiguous. With Rule 4, hands-off redistricting deviates from the current norm with one admittedly tricky additional requirement. District boundaries must be designed to maximize how close people are to others in their district. For the sake of discussion, let's call this goal optimal proximity and come back to it in a second. And the 5th and final rule, the solution that provides optimal proximity while satisfying the first 3 requirements is the one that will be adopted. Doesn't matter who proposes it, just matters how good it is. Okay, so all of this is easy except this new idea called optimal proximity. What do I mean by that? I'm not a mathematician, and I'd love some help from those who know better than I, but intuitively, this is what I'm after. Think of optimal proximity as the opposite of gerrymander. If extreme gerrymandering means coming up with bizarre district boundaries that bend and stretch all over the place and have people living very far from each other in the same district, optimal proximity means compact districts with boundaries that seem natural and economical. With that fuzzy description as our goal, here's a working definition of how optimal proximity is measured. Let's say you need to divide a hypothetical rectangular state into 4 congressional districts, keeping in mind that each of the 4 districts should have the same number of people in it, and the people will be clustered more densely in some areas versus others. You could sponsor a contest for anyone to enter, and you might get dozens or hundreds of entries. If you imagined that a fence ran along the district boundaries of every proposed scheme, you would simply measure the total fence required in each scheme, and the scheme that required the least fencing would be the new district boundaries. So, optimal proximity is achieved with the redistricting scheme that is most economical with district boundaries. How would this work in the real world? With apologies to the television personality, here's a proposal for Oprah. Oprah would just be a more sophisticated version of the example we just saw, with one addition to make it practical. All the fences between district boundaries have to follow along the established boundaries of U.S. census tracts. Using census tracts is a natural thing to do, since the reason the Census Bureau was created in the first place was to provide the base population data for redistricting. Each individual census tract tends to have between 1,000 and 8,000 people in them, and their boundaries were chosen intentionally to run along major geographical features so that they don't change over time. When a census tract gets too many people, the Census Bureau just subdivides it into smaller census tracts. California currently has just over 7,000 census tracts. With the data and tools the Census Bureau already has, it would be easy to calculate the length of the boundary between every census tract. This information could be used to create an interactive tool that anyone could use to try to map their own redistricting scheme, since the tool could keep track of districts, the number of people in each district, and the length of fence required in the scheme. This could be a very public process, open to well-meaning citizens as well as cranks and very sophisticated political organizations. But no matter how sophisticated the participant, the iron law remains. Whatever scheme requires the shortest fence is the scheme that will be adopted. What would be the result of a process like this? First, and most important, with a common sense and measurable standard for selecting the redistricting scheme, nobody can drive an unnatural solution. The current political parties will certainly still have their safe districts, but the number of truly competitive districts will increase dramatically. That means more representatives will have to worry more about what their constituents really think. It will be much riskier to vote the way your party boss wants if it isn't what the voters in your district want. Who knows, maybe some viable third parties will grow out of all of this. And finally, the whole process would radically change district boundaries immediately and keep the boundaries somewhat volatile on an ongoing basis. This introduces an element of uncertainty, almost of randomness, to the process of selecting congressional representatives. Talented and popular congressional leaders will still have their opportunities to serve, but their ability to rig the game to their own selfish benefit will disappear. So that's the concept. It's early days, but don't you think it makes sense? Leave a comment below, or send me an email, and please share this video with friends and colleagues.